Well, hello and welcome back. So, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about mediation. We're going to be talking about the difficulty of getting a divorce with a minor child or dealing with child custody. And believe me, it's not an easy feat, to be quite honest with you. When I started my journey, again, I really do. I wish I would have had somebody that would have already known what it was like and could have given me some advice because the whole thing is daunting. And to be quite frank, it is extremely stressful. And I want to talk about how your emotional status affects your actions and your decision making when going into mediation or dealing with court, and how it indirectly affects your children. And this was something that I realized very early on, was that, the legal system, in most cases, the legal system, you'll hear people all the time that say, "Oh, it's a mother state, it's a mom state." Da, 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 da. And actually, to my surprise and a lot of other people's surprise, it's actually not that. Now, it used to be, but it's not as much anymore. Most of the time, it's what's in the best interest of the child. And the way that I like to look at it is, picture a courtroom where there's two parents. And now we're going to completely take gender out of the equation. There's no mom, there's no dad, there's no she or he, there's no he, there's no she, whatever. We're going to take it. We're in a courtroom with a judge and two parents. Okay. The key word here is parents. The judge is going to see both of these parents as equal until there has been a substantial circumstance to make the judge believe otherwise. Now, this is only in the situation that mediation fails and it goes to pretrial and trial, which that is a whole other thing. And that's something that we'll talk about later on in another episode. And it's quite interesting. However, if you have two parents in a courtroom and there's, one child or two children, however many, in the middle of this whole thing, you're going to have either two attorneys or two people that are either going to be saying, well, I want child support, I don't want child support, or I want sole physical custody, or I want physical custody, or I just want joint custody, I want week on, week off, or I want every other weekend, or, they should have every other weekend, or I want, sole custody, but I only want them to see my children ever so often, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And in a lot of situations, you're going to have, two people that are completely against each other. It's he, she said scenario, or it's, they did this, they did that, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the circumstance is as to why, you're getting a divorce or you're fighting over a child or etc. And you end up coming to this stalemate, this like standoff where you're basically fighting over time with your child. And in a lot of situations, people don't realize this, but the children, they're affected by divorce. They're affected by child custody. They're affected by being taken from one place to another. It's a whole new world for them to experience. And that in itself is troubling for a lot of children, and they don't quite understand or grasp it. And it also depends on the age of the child as well. And something to think about too is, like, as somebody that was offering joint custody with week on, week off, our standard visitation, which is basically every other week, I was offering that until, me and my attorney came to the conclusion that that just wasn't going to work for the well-being of my son as well as myself. We came to the conclusion that sole physical custody was the best option. And we also had substantial circumstance to gain that ability in court as well. And, I was looking at the perspective that I wanted my child to have both of his parents. And that's the difficult part, is that not everybody's going to see that. Not everybody's going to understand that. And so when you have either one parent that's like, well, I want them all the time. I want the child tax credit. I want child support. I want this. I want that. Are they thinking, do you think that that sounds like a person that is thinking about what's in the best interest of their child or what's in the best interest of themselves? Because there's a massive difference. And the situation arises where if you go from thinking to yourself, okay, well, you know, the state is going to be looking at the best interest of the child. Well, the state's first thing is that they believe that it's in the best interest of the child to have a well-rounded relationship with both of their parents. This has been based in psychiatry. Children's behavioral medicine has agreed for a very, very long time that it is essential for children to have a well-rounded relationship with both of their children. And that's where you get the whole thing of, you know, either one parent going, well, I don't understand why the court did this. It makes no sense to me. I don't understand because, you know, I brought this up and I brought this up. And in most cases, the court is only going to be looking at substantial circumstance if the other parent has committed a crime against the child, or, you know, if they're abusive, if there's drug abuse, if there's, you know, child abuse, if there's something that says that this person is not in the best interest of the child. This person, this individual, this parent is going to negatively impact the growth and development of this child. And, you know, in a lot of situations, parents could be like, oh, well, you know, he or she, the other parent doesn't communicate with me. And there's several different people out there, especially attorneys, that will say that joint custody only works unless you can co-parent. And what co-parenting looks like is communication. If you can't communicate, co-parenting is not going to work. If one parent is withholding information about religion, education, and schooling, or religion, education, and medical, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. Like, there's just no way that it's going to work. And because at some point you're just going to end up back in court. You know, the other parent's going to come back in and be, you know, Your Honor, you know, they're not telling me about their education. They're not telling me about their medical. They're not telling me about, you know, when they're going to church, you know, all this stuff, you know, and communication is key in co-parenting. And, you know, we're not going to get into the whole like modification of, you know, stuff like that. But relatively later on in the future, I'm pretty sure we'll get into that conversation when Amanda Sullivan is back on the podcast, because she's an attorney. She could definitely, you know, navigate this situation. I do have quite a bit of knowledge in this. I have read quite a bit. I have experienced quite a bit, and I've seen quite a bit to understand at this point how the court system looks at certain things. And some things it's spot on, and some things it's not. There's a wide range of stuff that you can go through. However, the point of this podcast is to talk about, if you are going through a child custody situation, if you are going to mediation, try to put your emotions aside. Think about your child. Think about your child's situation. Think about how they may be feeling. And now, you know, let me point out one thing. Some people will sit there and be like, you know what? Children are too young. They don't understand, or they don't, you know, they're not old enough to make decisions for themselves. I personally will sit here and say, I agree, but I disagree. And here's why. I have seen in my own children that they see what's happening. They see it, and it affects them. They are aware of what's going on. And when you can step outside of your own emotions and think, not emotionally, but consciously, about your child and how they may be feeling about your parents being divided, separated, going between houses, etc. And not by any means by sitting here saying, hey, you know, stay together for the benefit of your child, because that is not an option. If you are in a very toxic relationship, if you are arguing every single day, and if it is directly affecting your child's behavior and their emotional stability by listening to their beloved parents going at it, it is not an option that you should be staying together for the benefit of the kids. Because is it really benefiting them if they're listening to you argue every single night? No, it's not. And so when I went to mediation, my thoughts were, I want to listen to what the other parent has to say. I'm going to consider everything. And then I'm going to sit back and look at this from my child's perspective, but not as my child, but as myself, my inner child, and think to myself, how would I feel about this? How would I think about this? And the conclusion that I came to was, I'd want both of my parents. I'd want to go out and have ice cream with both of my parents. I want to go to the zoo with both of my parents. I want to hang out with both of my parents. I want to experience good moments with both of my parents. And that's what I thought about. So I was willing to do joint custody week on, week off, or every other weekend. I was willing to pay child support. I was willing to do all this stuff. Now, did my other son's parent believe that that was a good option? No. She wanted still physical custody, and she wanted no communication, and she wanted me to have supervised visits for literally no reason at all other than the fact that she was extremely bitter that I had gotten married and moved on with my life. Mainly because of the fact that I did not want to be in an abusive, toxic relationship anymore. And if you're just now tuning in and this is your very first time listening to this podcast, I strongly suggest that you go and listen to the podcast or even watch it on YouTube. On YouTube, it is In the Hot Seat with Heavenly Nickers, or on Apple Podcast, it is What Really Happened. And episode 1 through 6 is on there, and you can learn all the details. And Amanda Sullivan is on there, which is my attorney and dear friend. However, if I hope that you take anything away from this episode, it is that if you are currently going through child custody, or if you know somebody that's currently going through child custody, I want you to sit back and think to yourself, how do I want to spend the rest of my time with my child? Do I want to spend the rest of my time with my child in court, spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in court? Or do I want to spend hundreds and thousands of hours and money on my child? Or do I want to spend hundreds of thousands of hours and money arguing with my other child's parent about what was said, what was done, or visitation, or etc.? And I think that what you'll find is that the child will benefit a lot more. And everybody's situation is going to be incredibly different. And, if you're dealing with abuse, if your child is being abused, then by all means, it is your right as a parent to protect that child. There is a thing called failure to protect. If you know that your child is being emotionally, mentally, and physically abused, it is your job to do the due diligence to protect your child. And if you continue to allow that to happen without doing anything about it, you are just as equally at fault. And example, let's look at the Gomez brothers, right? Or the Montel brothers, however you say their last name. I'm sorry if I butchered it. They were being sexually abused, and their mother did nothing about it. Their mother did literally nothing about it to protect them. She is at failure to protect her children. And that's a prime example of what I'm talking about. But if you are in a situation where both you and your spouse, your ex-spouse or ex-partner are just not met for each other, but you guys love your children and you want to raise them, and you may not see eye to eye on everything, but if you can come to the conclusion that, hey, let's spend the time that we have with our children and the money that we have on our children and what's necessary for them in their health and development versus arguing about it and fighting about it. because you're going to miss out on precious time and moments with your children if you're just focused on all the other stuff. Another great example is the original movie Santa Claus. You know, his son and, him, they were separated. They were going through a situation where, he was becoming Santa Claus and his, child's mother thought that he was crazy and they were going through a divorce. There's a lot of things that go into that. But other than that, if you have any suggestions on topics, or if you have any questions or anything that you would like me to answer, or even if you want to reach out to me and tell me your personal story, and if you would like me to respond to you in a podcast, I would be more than happy to. If you want, reach out to me on heavenlyleanne.com and we can have a conversation. Maybe I can give you some advice and we can go from there. Other than that, I hope that you have enjoyed today's podcast. My name is Heavenly Leanne Akers, and I will see you in the next episode.